What happens when you take a slasher movie but replace Michael Myers with a bathtub or a can of turpentine? We finally got our answer at the turn of the millennium with Final Destination, the movie where death itself turns everyday objects into Rube Goldberg killing machines. Final Destination came from the mind of Jeffrey Reddick, who wrote it as a spec script for The X-Files. Spec meaning he wasn't hired by the show, but took it upon himself to write an episode as a way to show what he could do. He called it Flight 180, and if you've ever wondered what the movie would be like if it was half as long and had Mulder and Scully in it instead of these guys, you can actually read the script today thanks to bloodydisgusting.com. That script was never actually submitted to the show because some friends at New Line Cinema read it and were so impressed they told him he'd be better off developing it as a feature. How'd it turn out? Let's run it through the ranking algorithm and find out. As always, I'll recap the movie. As I go, this meter will appear and adjust the score anytime the movie does something good or bad. At the end, we'll see where it lands and submit this movie to the ranking, my ongoing mission to rank every movie ever made. And now, Final Destination. Today is an exciting day for the graduating class of Mount Abraham High, because today they are to board Volé Airlines Flight 180 to Paris for their senior trip. But one particular student, named Alex Browning, is a little less excited. In fact, he's a bit nervous, because he has a bad feeling about this flight. The strange coincidences aren't helping, like the departure time that matches his birthday, or the music playing over the intercom, John Denver, who died in a plane crash in '97. Nevertheless, he boards the flight. Krista asks him to change seats with Blake so she can sit next to her friend, and he obliges. Then another sign. Broken tray table. They take off and the turbulence is bad. Bad enough people are starting to worry, but they don't have to worry long, because those who aren't flung out of the craft are incinerated when it explodes. Alex wakes in a cold sweat. He's back in his seat. Krista asks him to change. The same tray table is broken. It's just like the nightmare. No, the premonition. He shouts and warns the others. Of course, nobody listens. His bully Carter tries to shut him down, and they're both removed for the commotion. Alex's friend Todd and Carter's girlfriend Terry go after them. A couple of other students, too. Clear Rivers, because she believes Alex's warning, and Billy, just because he gets caught up in the shoving. None will be allowed back on the flight, so one of their teachers, Miss Luton, stays behind with them. Some are angry at Alex for ruining their trip. Others are concerned about him, but all their words die at once when Flight 180 blows up in the sky above them. Let's see where we're at. Mid-50s, that makes sense to me. The movie is somewhat entertaining so far, mainly because it does a great job of capturing that feeling of paranoia. But none of it is all that subtle. Alex tells his parents to keep the old tag on the suitcase. After all, the tag survived the last flight with no crashes, so it's a good sign going into this one. When he's on the toilet next to his friend Todd, he hears John Denver on the intercom and says to himself, "John Denver died in a plane crash." But some of it is a little more subtle and adds to the mood. His departure time is the same as his birthday. It's a weird coincidence that doesn't have to mean anything, but because of the mood that's been set, it becomes unsettling. And there are more. The alarm clock, which randomly flashes the flight number, the hypnotic departure board. Also unsettling? Why is the movie so keen to show us Alex and Todd on the toilet? The movie's lack of subtlety isn't just reserved for the paranoia, but the exposition in general. One of the first lines in the movie comes from Alex's dad. "So, 17, on the loose, senior trip with your friends in Paris, 10 days in the springtime. Live it up, you've got your whole life ahead of you." But that's okay. The movie is still fun. The paranoia, which accelerates once we're on the plane. After Alex switches seats, he finds the broken tray table. Usually that'd be annoying, but no big deal. Here, because everything seems off, it's another bad omen. Finally, the crash itself. It's terrifying and hard to look away from. It reminds me of Tarantino talking about Death Proof before it came out. He described how in a car crash, so many awful things happen inside the car all at once. There are so many gory details to the carnage you'd usually miss. That's why he actually played the scene multiple times from different angles. Final Destination doesn't go that far, but it does take its time with the details. It isn't just a crash where everyone dies at once. Some get thrown out a hole in the side of the plane, and others are incinerated. There's a morbid curiosity watching it play out, step by awful step. When a boy shouts that a plane will crash minutes before it does, naturally people will think he had something to do with it. But all the FBI's questions lead only to unsatisfying answers, and it's clear Alex did not do this, though that does little to heal the pain of grief and guilt. 39 days later, some of that pain has become need to understand what happened, though the internet research or the stack of books and articles next to his desk have not gotten Alex any closer. But perhaps if he pays close attention, there are signs. He tosses a magazine at the window when he's startled by an owl. The pages are shredded by the fan, landing one loose scrap on his thigh. The word today, but torn, so it leaves only 3 letters behind. T-O-D. Todd, the name of his fellow survivor and best friend, a friend who is currently attempting to shave. He doesn't notice water leaking from his toilet until he slips on it and ends up with a retractable clothesline wrapped around his throat. He falls into the tub and knocks over a bottle of shampoo, which makes the tub too slippery for his feet to get any traction. And that's how he dies, strangled in his tub. Then the puddle retracts back into the toilet, like a murderer slipping out of the night. Reading that torn magazine like a bad omen, Alex rushes to his friend's house, in time to see the coroner van. Clear is there too, warning Alex to get away before the FBI sees him and gets even more suspicious. But before he goes, Todd's dad tells him what happened. His son took his own life, and it was Alex's fault, because while Todd got off that plane, his brother didn't, and the guilt Alex caused him was too much. This is where we first see the movie's core concept at play, and it's a clever one that helps this movie stand out. Death manipulating events to kill the ones who got away. It should be inferior to a typical murder scene, because there's little suspense over will he get away or not. When the Grim Reaper shows up, you assume there's no winning, with rare exceptions. But instead, the suspense comes from a morbid curiosity that's almost darkly comedic. What's going to get him? A cut from his razor? Sparks from the radio plug? The scene knows what we're waiting for and has a lot of fun playing with those expectations. The movie also introduces an element that allows for more tension with upcoming death scenes, because although Alex was too late to intervene with Todd, we see that there will be warning signs. Now there's reason to wonder if the characters will survive or not, and our eyes will be glued to the screen searching for the next sign. Though when the movie isn't finding creative ways to kill people, it doesn't have much else to offer. The movie spends a few minutes at a memorial service after the 39 days pass. That's when you realize you hardly know these characters, other than some general tropes. Carter is the bully. Billy is kind of a goof, though oddly restrained considering he's played by Seann William Scott. Clear is the weird artsy girl. Alex, well, we don't know much about him except that he gets paranoid before flights. So it all makes for pretty unengaging scenes when the movie leans on drama, like Todd's memorial speech, or Todd's father giving Alex the stink eye since he lost a son on that flight. In scenes like this, the movie's boring. It's almost like it takes itself too seriously. It either needs to lean into the fun and accept that we're all here to see people die in creative ways, or really engage with the drama and develop these characters. At least there are some fun moments, like at the memorial, when Billy asks Alex if what his driver test administrator said to him is true.
Young man, you're gonna die at a very young age. Is that true?
Not now, not here, not ever, Billy.
I asked how Cynthia passed her. Will she say no?
Also, another scene of Todd on the toilet. What's the deal? Did actor Chad Donella have it in his contract? I want at least 2 scenes of me on the toilet or I walk. People need to see that I know how to do it. You pull down your pants and your undergarments. The next day, Alex visits Clear to find out why she was at Todd's place. It turns out that whatever he is in tune with, so is she. On the plane that day, she didn't share his vision, but she did feel something. And so the two of them team up to investigate Todd's death by breaking into the funeral home, where they run into the mortician, who explains some of the marks on Todd's neck from pulling at the wire. That's what Alex was looking for. If Todd was pulling, he obviously wasn't trying to kill himself. It was an accident. But the strange mortician dissuades Alex from that notion. In death, there are no accidents, and there are no escapes. Every move we make is part of death's sadistic design leading to the grave. Alex wonders, if you knew that design, could you cheat death? The mortician clears that up too. Alex and his friends already cheated death by walking off that plane. Now it has a new design for all of them, and Alex will have to figure out how and when it's coming back at them all over again. This is a weird section of the movie. On the one hand, Tony Todd is awesome as a character we'll learn from future movies is named William Bloodworth. He's great in the role and gives voice to a villain that otherwise remains invisible. He may not be death itself, but he certainly seems in tune with it and even revels in its inevitability.
I'll see you soon.
It's a creative touch that makes the franchise all the more memorable. Though it is pretty bizarre that Alex and Clear just met a guy who seems to have all the answers about what they're going through, and their response is basically, "Cool, thanks, bye." Sure, Alex asks one question about whether or not you can cheat death, but considering the stakes, I think it's worth a couple of follow-up questions. You can also really feel the movie struggling to fill the time between those creative death scenes. There's a bizarre attempt at developing Clear as more of a character with this artistic creation of hers, a statue representing Alex.
No, like you, the sculpture doesn't even know what or why it is. It's reluctant to take form, and you're creating an absolute but incomprehensible attraction.
The movie hasn't given us enough reason to buy into these characters or care about this apparently budding relationship between them. And it's hard to entirely buy that without a second's hesitation, their first thought is to break into the funeral home to see Todd's body. There's no hesitation over the fact that it's the corpse of his best friend, and it takes a degree of overconfidence to imagine you'll be able to examine the body with no medical knowledge and learn something from it. They're just lucky the mortician happens to be there to explain it to them. There's also this awkward exposition, another attempt at fleshing out Clear's character.
Gives me a rush.
This place?
Doing something I'm not supposed to.
It already felt weird how ready they were to do this, but Alex is about to see his dead best friend, and the lack of empathy from Clear feels really odd, especially considering the setup, as shallow as it is, that the two are striking up some kind of relationship. Afterward, at a cafe, Alex spots the reflection of a bus going by in a window, but when he turns to the road, no bus. Then an impromptu reunion when all the Flight 180 survivors happen to run into each other at this very corner. Alex tries to tell them about death's design, how it's still coming for them, but they do not want to hear it. Terry storms off and gets hit by a bus. If Alex had been paying more attention, he would have realized earlier that the ghostly reflection was another warning, like that torn magazine. That night, the news reports on the cause of the Flight 180 crash. Deterioration of silicon insulation leaked combustible fluids. A spark in the fuel switch ignited the fuel line and proceeded to the fuel pump. Alex notices that the spark occurred right at Todd's seat. That gives him a hunch. He overlays the path of the explosion on their seat map. Todd would have been first, then Terry. They're all dying in the order they would have died had they stayed on the plane. It's fun watching Alex start to puzzle out Death's design. With such a nebulous villain, it's hard to imagine how there could be any way to defend against it, except for some rare exceptions. Oh wait, I already did that bit. Moving on, as I was saying, it's hard to imagine how you fight such a nebulous entity. The whole signs thing feels a little cheap, because it doesn't take much work on the part of the main characters. You see a reflection that isn't there, or a piece of paper with your friend's name on it, then look out. But here, Alex actually gets something to actively do, and he works out Death's design. It's more satisfying and a good way to fill the gap between deaths rather than boilerplate drama. Terry's death was also pretty shocking considering the build-up to Todd's. That first one trained us to expect a lot of misdirections and build-up, so this one coming out of nowhere, happening so fast, makes you jump in your seat. On the other hand, it also feels a little inconsistent and haphazard, like the filmmakers are making things up as they go along. For example, with Todd, death made him slip on water, then it actually sucked the water back up to hide the evidence. But why? Why does it care whether people think it was a suicide or an accident? In Terry's case, it didn't seem to care at all, because there were plenty of witnesses to attest it was an accident. Following the path, Miss Luton would be next. Alex heads over to her place, and she spots him snooping outside her house, so she calls those FBI agents. They pick him up for questioning, and he tries to warn them that the teacher is next. Of course, they don't believe him, but as they speak, death is coming for her. She even spots the reflection of a dark cloud in her kettle. She pours the hot water into a mug, then sees the school logo on it, triggering her survivor's guilt. She spills that water on her floor and opts instead for some ice and vodka. Perhaps due to the sudden change in temperature, or simply death's design, the mug cracks. She doesn't notice, and as she walks, she doesn't notice the vodka dripping on her floor and on her monitor. The vodka and circuitry make for a dangerous mix, and the resulting explosion of glass cuts the teacher's throat. By now, the FBI has let Alex go with nothing to hold him on. He heads back toward Miss Luton's house, and on the way, receives another sign, a man burning leaves in his backyard. Alex runs, but the omen has already come to pass. The monitor ignites the line of alcohol she dripped on the floor, leading back to the stove and bottle of vodka next to it. The explosion knocks her on the floor. Struggling for life, she reaches up to grab a hand towel, forgetting she draped it over the knives. By the time Alex gets inside, one of them is already plunging into her chest, and another explosion causes a chair to hit that knife, as though hammering it in, finally ensuring death. Alex runs outside as the house explodes. Wow. Death really wanted to kill Miss Luton. How does it decide when to give someone a quick and painless death, or when to draw it out slowly and painfully? Also, Luton seems to take a pretty big hand in her own death, too. Does she always throw the hand towel over her knives, or did death make her do that? But if you're looking for a great example of the sort of fun to be had with the Final Destination concept, this scene is it. There are so many paranoid steps to follow. What's going to get her? There's hot water on the floor, a gas stove next to the bottle of vodka, the cracked mug, towel on the knives, and this time, nearly every element plays a role. It is a little tonally off because it becomes absurd how much the death escalates. She's lying on the floor, bleeding out of her neck, surrounded by flames. Then she reaches up to grab the towel and, oopsie, I just stabbed myself in the heart. It's a level of clumsiness that almost makes the scene feel like a super violent take on Abbott and Costello. It goes back to what I said earlier. Maybe the movie should have leaned more into being fun rather than taking itself too seriously, because when it takes itself seriously, this scene gets caught in the middle of feeling awful for the teacher while kind of laughing at her. The FBI investigation is also starting to feel like a pointless addition to the movie. At first, it was interesting to see how they'd react to an event with no explanation other than the supernatural, but we never really get an answer to that. Instead, they just act as an obstacle to slow down Alex. Every protagonist needs obstacles, but it has to be interesting to see how they navigate those obstacles. When it comes to the FBI, Alex just runs and hides, which doesn't seem too hard, and when they catch him, they just hold on to him for a bit and let him go. They're just a convenient plot device to make sure Alex can't get where he needs to be in time to intervene. It all feels like the movie's struggling with the fact that the villain is so invisible and nebulous. The following night, the remaining survivors run into each other again. Wait, how do they all keep bumping into each other randomly? How small is this town?
Why'd you want us to meet you here anyway, huh?
Oh, they agreed to meet. Okay, that makes sense. The following night, the remaining survivors meet, and now they are ready to believe Alex's theories. Death is coming for them, and he knows who's next. It's all too much for Carter. He floors the gas and drives like he has a death wish. Alex notices his seatbelt is ripped, and he sees another ghostly reflection, this time of a train. Finally, Carter parks on the tracks. He turns off the engine as a train approaches. The rest of them get out of the car. At the last moment, Carter tries to move the car, but it won't start. The door is stuck, and his seatbelt won't open. Risking his own life, Alex pulls him out through the window, ripping open the seatbelt, and they survive. Alex saw Death's design, the train, the ripped seatbelt, and they cheated it. So Death skips Carter and goes to the next soul on the list. Billy. The train runs over a broken shard of the car's debris, catches a piece of it in the wheels, and sends it flying with enough force to decapitate Billy. I first saw this movie when I was probably too young to be watching it, and this is the moment that's burned into my memory. It's another surprise death like Terry's, though maybe more so considering it came right after they seemingly cheated Death, and things were starting to calm after an intense sequence. It was also the first time in my life I'd seen someone decapitated this way, where it isn't clean through the neck, but instead a little above it, like some of his chin is still attached to the body. So awesome. And unexpectedly gory considering what the movie had shown up to this point. The lead-up was also intense, with Carter losing his mind and driving like a maniac. It probably would have been more effective if his character were more developed, but either way, it was unexpected. Until now, Death itself has been the only real threat, so this scene changes things up and introduces a new flavor of danger. It helps the movie feel less repetitive. At the same time, there's more drama to work through, which just falls completely flat, like an entirely pointless scene of Alex and Clear stargazing. Though Billy has perished, his demise proves Death can be cheated. After all, it skipped over Carter thanks to Alex's intervention. All they have to do is pay attention to the signs and intervene until they're all skipped. Next up is Alex himself, and he is not taking any chances. He holes up at Clear's dad's cabin, where he covers up any sharp nails, uses duct tape to ensure nothing falls, sits by a fire extinguisher, and even wears thick gloves when he opens up a can of chicken spread, which he chews very carefully. That's when it happens. The wind blows. It knocks over a bag, releasing a can that rolls across the floor, which hits a fishing rod which latches onto the closet door. It starts to yank it open, but Alex moves fast to stop it. He slowly opens the door and finds fish hooks that could have been his demise. But then he remembers something. In his vision on the plane, Krista asked him to change seats, and he did before the plane went down. That means the seat map is inaccurate. He is not next on Death's list. Clear is, and a spark from his lighter is the omen that tells him her manner of death. The scene of Alex in the cabin is another one burned into my memory. There's a dark humor to it, watching someone so paranoid they've come to see every object in their house as a threat. There's also a hint of an interesting arc to Alex's character. Of course he is fighting for survival, but you can also see he's starting to think of Death as an opponent, one that he wants to defeat.
Tetanus. Nice one. I overlooked it. I caught you. You fuck. I got this cabin rigged to beat you now.
He gets so caught up in the game that after Billy dies, he skips shock or grief and goes right into planning their next move.
And because I saved him, it skipped Carter and went to the next person in the path of the explosion, Billy. I have to see it. And if I see it, then I intervene. And if I intervene, I cheat the design.
It's fun to see this game of chess between Alex and Death. Way more fun than that other movie where the guy plays chess against Death. Yeah, the algorithm is coming for you next, Ingmar Bergman. Alex versus Death, this is all good stuff. Though the scene starts to go too far, where Alex's insane ramblings don't feel all that organic or in character.
But intervene, what do you got now? God's unafraid to die. Gods don't die. We do, you know?
Baby, you're losing it, okay?
All the gods aren't afraid to die stuff feel like they wanted Alex to get really unhinged, but they didn't quite pull it off. Also, what's with Clear calling Alex baby all of a sudden? It feels like they wanted to set up a romance between her and Alex, but a bunch of that stuff got cut out. And that's actually true because originally there was a love scene on the beach. Once Alex is in the cabin, there's also a fun moment where it really does feel like a chess match, and it turns out Death is one move ahead because Alex forgot about the seat change. So there's a twist. Clear is next on the list, not him. No points though because ultimately it's kind of pointless. Whether Alex or Clear are next on the list, he should already be rushing over to check on her. He should have been on his way the moment he thought he survived his turn, when he almost died by fishhook. Because remember, after Carter got skipped, Billy died only a couple of minutes later. So why is Alex dilly-dallying so much? Look, when the fishhook incident occurred, it was light out. It's dark by the time Clear's turn comes around, and Alex is still just sitting around throwing old newspapers into the fireplace. Really, with how quickly Death can move once it skips, they should be in that cabin together. I'd be pissed if I were Clear. So, Alex, you're going to make yourself the safe house. What about me? It's fine. Once I cheat Death, I'll run through the woods and evade the cops and get there faster than literal death. I can outrun mysterious cosmic forces. Trust me. Can't I just stay in the cabin with you, baby? I don't think there's enough room. And could you stop calling me baby, you weirdo? Outside Clear's house, lightning strikes a power line, leading to a dangerous wire thrashing in her backyard. She tries to get her dog away from it. When the pool is punctured, water spills out beneath the live wire. She escapes the growing puddle by jumping onto the side of her house, and in the water's reflection, she sees a black fog. Alex runs to her through the woods, nearly drowning in a puddle when lightning knocks a tree on him. How do you drown like that? Just turn your head. But this part was pretty cool, when he stops himself just before impaling his head on a sharp branch. Clear climbs up her house and gets inside, but is quickly surrounded by sparking electronics. So she runs to the car and backs up through the garage door, where she gets stuck with a live wire thrashing on the hood, and a can on its side leaking turpentine. Alex gets there and tries to knock the wire off the hood with a shovel, and ends up igniting the stream of combustible fluid. The car will explode. Alex decides if someone is going to die, fine, but it will not be her. Not the woman he loves, maybe, I don't know. He grabs the wire with his bare hands, allowing her the moment she needs to escape. Then the car explodes. And Alex is barely alive. Clear cheated Death, and so, it seems, did he. As the finale, it's a little disappointing because the fun of the movie is how will they die? It's watching the red herrings and seeing how one thing leads to another. Here, Death feels a lot less clever, like he's tried everything and nothing will kill these kids. So I'm just gonna start blowing stuff up and hope something kills them. It also attempts a heroic sacrifice, but it hasn't developed the characters enough to earn one. Alex even says to Clear, "I'll always be with you," which is a weird thing to say so early in a relationship that we're only theorizing exists. They haven't even kissed and he's already committing to eternity. I guess after booting her out of the cabin, he feels bad, and he figures, hey, if I'm about to die anyway, might as well throw her a bone. But the mechanics of death, what causes it to skip and what happens when it does, are interesting. They are the clever part of this movie, so it's intriguing when the scene ends with Alex not breathing, but alive. It makes you wonder, does that count? 6 months later, the remaining survivors of Flight 180, Alex, Clear, and Carter, finally take that trip to Paris. Clear and Carter want to celebrate this chance at a full life, but Alex can't shake the feeling death is not finished with them. After Clear, Alex should have been next, but no one intervened. He got caught in that explosion and just happened to live. Maybe he's still next. He notices a nearby street performer singing John Denver, and he sees Death's machinations all around them. He gets up in a panic, and Clear notices a bus's reflection, but no bus. She cries out, and Alex dodges it, causing the bus to hit a street sign, which knocks over a larger sign, sending it swinging toward Alex. Carter tackles him out of the way. Perhaps this was finally meant to be Alex's turn, and Carter intervened. Now, it would seem, death has gone back to the top of the list. The sign swings back, with Carter directly in its path. And that's not a very satisfying conclusion. It's a cliche in horror movies. We beat the thing, but wait, or did we? It also feels random that Death skipped clear and waited 6 months to go after Alex. It'd be one thing if it actually skipped him, and then it takes time before Death restarts the list to try again. That just feels more logical than stopping in the middle of the list and waiting for no reason. I mean, to the extent that there's any logic to any of this. Apparently, in the original ending, Alex died when he grabbed the cables, meaning Death skipped clear and finished with Alex. This version also included a love scene on the beach, so the epilogue would have had Clear give birth to a baby conceived with Alex. But test audiences hated that ending, which makes sense to me considering the poorly developed romance. So they came up with this ending, which might explain why it feels a little inorganic to the story that came before. So here's the final score. It's a fun movie with a clever idea that'll make you paranoid the next time you look at anything, because if there's one thing this movie teaches us, it's that everything can kill you. But some things just bore you, like superfluous drama, half-baked romance, and pointless FBI agents. Subscribe and stay tuned for Final Destination 2. Do you think it'll score higher or lower than this one? Take a guess in the comments and stay safe out there. Make sure your toilet isn't leaking. Also, don't ever use a clothesline over your tub. Oh, and don't put your pool anywhere near a power line. While you're at it, never put a hand towel over your knife block. And do not listen to John Denver. And this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Don't park on the train tracks. Don't blindly walk into the road without looking both directions. Honestly, safest thing to do? Nothing. Just sit there and watch more episodes of Ranked.